Good morning. I am Peter Goldsworthy, COO of LaunchVic. I'm excited to be hosting the information session for 30 by 30 Cohort 4. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past and present. I always like to kick off sharing about the program and start with the origin. So Kate Cornick, our CEO in 2021, observed that there was a gap in the market for Series A plus companies in the support that was out there for them. And she saw that once they go through an accelerator or raise that round, that they're scaling up a little bit slower than they expected. So I was chatting with Kate. I was still in Southeast Asia, in Jakarta, scaling boring B2B software companies. I'd been an exec and I'd been a founder. And I observed a few things as well when I was on that journey. And that was, it wasn't sales or fundraising or any of that stuff or product that slowed me down. It was the HR side, which is the people, being able to scale that culture from, say, 20 people. When you go to 200, it's a totally different beast. And then finance, the finance guardrails. When I got my Series B term sheet, it was that DD and that financial rigor that really tripped me up. And then on the operations side, it was really serving customers at scale and being able to add 10x the number of customers and the business not falling apart. And so when I moved back to Melbourne, I started chatting and testing this hypothesis that this program could serve these three functions and help scale-ups become unicorns faster. And so I chatted to around 50 ecosystem participants. They were founders, investors. Funnily enough, they had the same issues. The founders are really focused on that growth, focused on the fundraising side, focused on the board, and they just don't have time to be able to focus on supporting these three functions. And so another hypothesis was that there'd be great mentors out there that have been in the companies like realestate.com.au or Seek or Xero or Canva or CultureAmp, and they'd be willing to give up their time to be able to support these leaders. That assumption was true as well. So we've got some great mentors in this program, and what they do is they really help you to be able to learn what capabilities your company needs to get ahead of that scaling curve. We've got three of them joining us today. Nicole Hopkins has been with us since day one in the program. We also have Mark and Daniel. Each of these scale-up execs and unicorn leaders, they run each of the three functions. So Nicole runs a HR stream, finance is Mark Orchard, and Dan is the operations stream. They're going to share more about the program, and you'll be able to ask questions at the end of this info session. I'd like to bring Nicole on stage, who's going to be sharing about the HR stream now.
Thanks, Pete. Hi, everyone. I'm Nick Hopkins, and I am founder of Up and to the Right Consulting. I currently focus on seed to Series C, growing startups and scale-ups, and all the tension points that come when you bring people into your great idea and go into scale. But prior to that, my background, I was an operator for over 15 years at companies like Dollar Shave Club, and most recently heading up the people function at Webflow as they saw scale from being valued at $200-300 million to $4 billion and growing from 100 people to 600 people. And so I've seen it all, although I say I haven't seen it all because things always come up. And I think that's the fun of running a program like this and bringing these amazing mentors together. You have world-class talent being able to come in and say, oh, I experienced this, or did you hit that tension point? Because we know the reason we get into these startups and scale-ups is to grow something amazing, do what hasn't been done before. And with that comes a lot of trial and error, and things break along the way. And so learning how to fix them quickly and pivot is going to make or break your success in the long run. But from the HR stream perspective, we focus on 6 different capabilities all across the different aspects of the employee lifecycle and what a chief people officer brings to the table strategically. And I won't go into all of those, but I think when I look back on the past 4 cohorts and I look at the participants that went through it and what they exited the program with that maybe they didn't have before, a few things come to mind. The first one is confidence in themselves and in their capabilities that they're building. Sometimes they've done it before, but in a different environment. Sometimes they're going from a different function completely and heading up the HR function and thinking, is this the right way to go about it? Has this been done before? I don't want to have to recreate the wheel, but I want to make sure I'm doing things in a way that's going to service our strategy. So confidence is huge. alignment with the leadership team. When you think about people, ops, and finance, they have to be in lockstep to be able to overcome some of the hurdles and challenges that come with things around due diligence and fundraising, or the people aspect, being able to scale that culture, still drive high performance and not slow down the operations while it's happening. And then, of course, buy-in. When you think about founders and hiring these amazing execs in for the first time, they often don't know what they do, and that's okay. But being able to get that buy-in and manage up really well so that there's confidence both from the person leading the function, but also from the founder saying, yep, I trust this person. I know they're going to be able to deliver on what I've hired them to do. And I know they have an amazing network of people around them to support them in the areas they might have less experience in is huge. And last but not least, thinking about the last 4 cohorts, and this was definitely an unintended consequence of the program, is the community that follows. I have not gone one day since we launched the program where there's not a WhatsApp message from someone in the program asking support, a question, or just having a bit of fun and sending a funny meme to someone else who's gone through the program. So we've created an amazing alumni community where they still call upon each other and they have friendships that I think will go far beyond the 30 by 30 program. But with that, there's a lot more I could go into in the HR stream. I'll point out that there are 2 things that I really think are the most important from a capability standpoint that we touch on. One being how to scale a performance culture through these different horizons of growth. So, organically, what happens under 40 people changes, as Pete said, when you hit 100 or 200 people. How do you intentionally scale a high-performing culture and remove the roadblocks that get in the way? And the second thing is becoming an enabler from a CPO perspective. How do you enable your management team to become leaders of a company, not just their function, and bringing that group together to create amazing things? And so with that, we'll get into a lot more as we keep going. But I would love to introduce my counterparts and let them tell you a little bit about their background, as well as what they see the benefits being for participants in their streams. So with that, I'll start by introducing Daniel Shaw-Dennis, our ops stream facilitator. Hey, Dan.
Thank you, Nick. Hey, how's it going? Thank you, Nick, and thank you, everyone, and welcome today. So yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit about the ops stream, but firstly, with my background, I was part of corporate life in the data analytics kind of corporate world for 10 years. And then a little while ago, 14 years ago now, we started a journey, a little Australian-based, Melbourne-based analytics company that started with 10, grew to 150 plus globally. And I was very fortunate enough to work in, I guess, nearly every part of the business except coding it, which, I'm not a developer, but, and learnt so much along this kind of crazy scaling journey along the way. And last cohort, I was fortunate enough to be kind of mentor and coach across the ops stream, and this year facilitator. So I'll talk a little bit about, I guess, the program and some of my takeaways from that as well, because having been part of the scaling journey, you're all just running at pace all the time. It kind of doesn't really stop. And having been part of that, when you actually can stop for a couple of seconds, get different perspectives, hear from people who've done it, and sometimes even validate some of the decisions you're trying to make, it does make a massive difference. And Nick talked about confidence in getting that through. So I guess looking at the program, that's part of what it tries to bring, be able to validate that against mentors, be able to hear different perspectives. I look at the ops stream as kind of giving the ops leaders that, I guess, full set of armor. I think sometimes you're so busy in one area, there's other areas that could, if you could understand and get bolstered by that, can really improve the ability to execute for a business. And I know Nick talked about alignment of teams and drivers. With ops, sometimes you have the founder needs, you have the sales director's needs, you've got CS needs, you've got head of dev needs. You've got to do this balancing act all the time. So giving you the kind of tools to be able to have those conversations in the right way, deal with things in the right way, and hopefully get the outcome was one of the big things. I think from a program perspective, as well as I think talking about giving you, I guess, a full stack CIO is the term we like to use as part of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
With this, sorry, Mick, go for it.
I was going to ask you, when you think about the full stack COO, what are some of the capabilities that you think Cohort 4 will be focused on?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a few things there. I said being able to have those conversations around the functions of your team. That's such an important area, and how to navigate that, which is one thing I know you work on very about this HR stream. Trying to also align your teams as you grow and having to make decisions around that and commit funds to something. How do you get, I guess, that team alignment as well? And I guess growth is another obviously key bit as we get into that scale stage. And how do you really, from a go-to-market perspective, you might be looking at new channels and expansion, and how do you navigate those and actually learn from those that have done it before as part of that?
That's great. Amazing. What are you most excited about going into Cohort 4 and facilitating this time around?
Look, I've got being a Melbourne-based company trying to do it big on the big stage. I love when we're trying to get up there and do it. So just meeting, I guess, the new team, trying best as we could kind of help them along their journey. And I think a lot of the coaches and mentors kind of feel the same way. I think one of the things that with last cohort, and again, is you can actually have a more direct, raw conversation. It's not the fluffy stuff. It's actually getting into the, like, what are some of the problems, getting into real, like, open conversations about that and looking at solutions. And that's the big one that I took out of cohort 3, and I think bringing into this one, you've got some great mentors and coaches who have been there and done that and don't have any agenda, just want to really help the next kind of generation grow. I think that makes a big difference in having some like real conversations and real solutions as part of that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the hardest things that we hear from participants. It takes like 1 or 2 goes to come in and then be like, I can now share all the things that I'm really struggling with, because I see that we all have something in common and we can help each other out, when sometimes it feels like I'm the only one going through this at this particular moment in time.
Absolutely. And I think you talked about it before. I mean, having another network of your peers. And I remember running sessions, you start off talking about it and they talk about their experiences. We did this, we did that. And they start to just talk, bounce ideas off each other. It becomes a session about the teams and some of the things, and which is great because you get people talking. Once you open up and get into it, you can get so much value leveraging the experience of others.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. We're so excited. Anything else you want to mention on the ops stream before we introduce our third partner in crime?
Look, I think the big takeaway is, I guess, getting the tools to get there quicker was the big thing. I said part of the ops stream is, you're going to get frameworks, strategies that want those that have done it before. I always think it's the little nuggets of gold along the way that add up to the fortune type thing. So, that's the big thing. If you can take little takeaways out of each session, they do add up. And, ways to get there a little bit quicker, opportunity cost big. That's the big thing that I see as the takeaways as part of the whole stream as well.
That's awesome. Great. Well, we'll see you soon for the Q&A. Let's move on to Mark. Thanks, Daniel. We have Mark Orchard, who is our finance stream facilitator. Hey, Mark.
Hola. Good to see you, Nick.
Good to see you. Why don't you start by just giving us a rundown of your background and experience?
Got you. Hey, Dream Team. So I'm Mark. I'm the finance stream facilitator for the 30 by 30 program. And I'm also the CEO of a virtual CFO firm called Planet Startup. We work with seed to Series B, early stage tech companies, going through all the different challenges and tribulations of growing and scaling a high growth company in Australia. My background originally was in financial planning. I had a financial planning firm that I successfully sold in 2015. And a lot of my big clients who were doing alternative investments or investing in a number of high growth tech companies here in Brisbane, where I'm typically located, and then down south in Sydney and Melbourne. And so I jumped on the startup train and ended up as the director of startups at BDO, which is a large accounting firm. We worked with about 500 to 600 startups from startup to exit. And we worked with several $100 million plus exits coming in as either the virtual CFO, coming in as the finance function, or supporting through that due diligence into transactions. And so there's very little that I haven't seen, Nick, when it comes to finance inside of early stage high growth companies. I've also had a chance to work in a number of tech companies themselves, both in the finance and executive functions. So have had hands-on experiences being as part of the team as well. I think the thing that I'm passionate about when it comes to finance is that sometimes finance can be regulated as a lag indicator of reporting what everybody else has done, and sometimes is seen as the bad cop or the person coming into the room saying no to everyone's budget requests. And I'm really passionate about making finance much more performance focused and bringing I guess that performance and finance lens to the start of the process. So helping build out the metric sets, helping them to measure and understand what performance for the company looks like, and helping build in I guess, the key KPIs or reporting functions throughout the process, so that the CEOs and the founders have the information that they need to make really proactive and data-driven decisions, but also from a finance function point of view, that we can focus on not just the tactical day-to-day stuff that is the stuff that needs to be done, the hygiene stuff, but we can really contribute from a strategy point of view and helping each of the different functions to do their best work. And so I think as part of the 30 by 30 program, the thing I love is watching finance leaders come in thinking that their job is simply to report the numbers, and then giving them the confidence to have a commercial opinion, and then stepping into a more performance focused and certainly high growth opportunity to lead the finance team and be part of that management culture.
I love it. Yeah, that was my question. What do you feel like the finance operators leave this program with? So commercial acumen coming in, and it's not just that lagging indicator, right? It's like, how do we get you your budget ask to yes? That's my favorite HR question from that finance.
Bless HR. Love it.
Absolutely.
No, I think one of the things that I've noticed is that, particularly if you haven't worked as a CFO or as a finance lead in a high growth company before, the misunderstanding of finance sometimes is that our job is simply to be able to provide numbers, but it isn't to be able to or there's not as much focus on the narrative or the politics of being influential as the finance lead. And so the interesting thing about being the CFO or being the finance lead is that oftentimes, particularly when it comes to the board or comes to investors, like, you're the second most important executive when it comes to those particular functions, because your job is to be able to give like credibility to the CEO or the founders doing those reporting. And so giving the finance lead confidence, not just in their technical capability, but also in their storytelling ability, their ability to demonstrate numbers in story and to be able to communicate across the function, and then getting everyone to buy into that. We see a huge transition in our cohort from finance managers that are a little bit reserved in providing a commercial opinion, through to, by the end of the program, being really, I guess, encouraged and sponsored by their founders and CEOs to communicate effectively what they're seeing coming up, what are some of the challenges that they're going to face, how do we build out a proper KPI/metric function across the business so everybody is on the same, is aligned to the same goals and outcomes, and just increasing the credibility, I guess, of like the growth plans that the CEO or the founders are trying to champion. Like, the finance function has an amazing opportunity to really influence across the company, and that's what we see a lot of our finance leaders step into over the 4 to 5 months of the program.
Amazing. Thank you for the overview of the capabilities. I think it would be also very interesting to hear, since you are a returning facilitator, what you've seen some of the biggest takeaways be for finance participants, or anyone, without having to name names, that comes to mind. Like, what have you seen folks take from the program, and where are they now?
Got you. So we've kind of had 3 different little mini groups inside of my finance groups over the last few cohorts, Nick. The first is what I call the experienced finance leads or CFOs, and they kind of come in with like some really great experience, oftentimes in other contexts. So they've worked in corporate, or they've worked in a large enterprise company. Now they're bringing that skill set into a startup lens, and for them, what they get is like a real appreciation for the context of high growth startups, and sometimes what they can let go of in order to be able to be exceptionally good at being able to run the finance function of a sub-billion-dollar company that's scaling quickly. The second is what I call the finance manager type role. So somebody who came into the business in a more junior finance role. And for them, their goal is to step up and try and take ownership of that leadership capability. And for them, like, what we see is a huge increase in capability, a huge increase in confidence, but probably most importantly, is the ability to communicate effectively to management, and to be really able to start to step into the shoes of the finance leader or the CFO that their CEO or founder needs. And then lastly is we've often had, because not all high growth companies have a dedicated finance resource in their business. So we actually had a couple of founders who have stepped in, I guess, as the representative of the finance function. And one of my favorite lines was actually Michael from Thriday, where he's like, "Oh wow, this is what finance does. I need to find a really great finance person." And bless it, like, the great thing about Michael is that he executed that really quickly, and we've seen that some of the founders who have come into the business, have come into the program, have completely changed the profile of the person that they wanted to run their finance function because of seeing best practice in this particular context. And so the thing that excites me is that instead of simply delegating, I guess, like business as usual and like, financial hygiene tasks to an internal finance person, they're then going much more high level and looking for someone who can strategically support the business to grow, not just report the numbers. And I think that's the most exciting thing for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the founders who kind of step into the finance stream, which leads me to a different question. And that is, what is like the optimal size of team? What would you say to someone who's maybe on the fence of expressing interest that doesn't have a finance leader or an HR leader in place? What's your opinion?
I would argue that, and look, this would be certainly subjective, Nick, but if you are at the earliest stage of applying for the program and may not have your full executive suite set up yet, that you have possibly the most to gain out of coming into the program, because you can literally see as part of this cohort, what is the bar that you should be expecting of your people coming into your business. And like, as you would know, Nick, with HR, like your people are your business, and it's really hard or it's really expensive to replace or undo a hire that wasn't effective in the first instance. And so one of the things that excites me is that between the mentors who come into the program and the other participants who are going through the cohort, all the founders who have stepped in to our into our cohort or into our finance stream have been able to go, oh, what I really need is a strategic person to teach me what I need to know about the numbers, as well as to be able to build the team. Or I have a finance background, so I know what I need, like from a strategic point of view. I just need someone to be able to run the numbers on a day-to-day basis and report to me each week. Like, they've been very deliberate or very purposeful in hiring the person that they need, not the person that they feel like that they should hire based on what they read on TechCrunch or some other startup paraphernalia. And so I think that purposefulness and that alignment is the thing that's really exciting, because that means you go faster. Ultimately, like, if you slow down to go smooth, and that smooth then turns into going fast. Like, I think that's where people who are coming into the program with a smaller team, but potentially looking at then hiring people to fill in these functions, have like an unusual advantage coming into this program.
Yeah, absolutely. You made me think of one of the founders who joined the HR stream last go around, and I think quoted coming out of it, she was like, I think this is one of those situations where I just had no idea what this function did. And I see all these great opportunities. I now know what I need to hire. And that was, even coming out of that, just having that clarity of what she needed was huge. And so
and then being able to pull in you in to kind of help with interviewing, and then being able to have some peer support in regards to, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Can you guys give me some feedback? Like, simply being able to have that community network, to have those conversations, it just speeds everything up and reduces like the amount of risk or the amount of errors that you can do through the process. Like, I think there's a lot of value in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, before we open it up to Q&A, because I see a lot of great questions coming in, anything else you want to mention about the finance stream before we bring back Dan?
Yeah, got you. I think the thing that I'm most excited for this cohort is that as the cohorts have come through, their levels of sophistication have increased. And so, like, what I'm expecting in this next cohort will be people who do have a lot of commercial experience, and people who are exceptionally capable as finance leads, and who want to take that next step professionally themselves, and also to lead their business, particularly through what I'm hoping with like the way that the macro market kind of lands, is that next year we'll start to really see an openness in the finance markets to be really pushing into large funding rounds for like those companies in this $500 million to $1 billion valuation space. Like, I think that this is a great time for a high growth company to take the opportunity to prepare for that. And from a finance lead point of view, I think pragmatically, our focus is very much going to be around commercial decision making, like funding and leading funding rounds for your company, and becoming that CEO or that CFO that your CEO and founders need. Like, I think that practical professional development is going to put everybody in good stead for the next 6 to 12 months. And so, really excited, Nick, and looking forward to it.
Same. Thanks so much for the overview. And so what we'll do now, we'll transition into our Q&A portion of the session. Welcome back, Dan. And we'll be just going through the questions that you have in the chat. So we'll start by going through those. If you come up with more, feel free to add them in, and we'll go through as many as we can in the time that we have left. So let me throw this one out to the group. What is the most material outcome of being involved as a founder of the 30 by 30 program?
That is a great question, Nick. Dan, do you mind if I start and you can
Go for
add
it,
to
mate.
that?
Absolutely.
Got you. All right. So if I was a founder, or if I was like the management team and thinking about the material outcomes of the 30 by 30 program, I guess there'd be two parts to that. The first would be like, what are the objective outcomes that we can achieve after this program? And I think that looking at the case studies, and I think we've, like, companies have gone through the 30 by 30 program over the last 3 to 4 cohorts have raised something like $165 million over the last like 24 months. Like, there's some substantial success stories. And I think just being pragmatic, like, a lot of that can come back to like some of the experiences or some of the outcomes that like we talked about or discussed, or challenges that those companies were having that they've been able to manage through and then successfully overcome. I would love to think that the program has certainly, from a material point of view, contributed to that ongoing success and that continued growth. But if I'm thinking internally, Nick, particularly with some of the HR focus that was across one of the capabilities last year, there seems to be this really interesting alignment that happens across the team and increased confidence of the executive team that really gets behind the vision of the founders and gives them like confidence that they not only have the team for scale, but that now everyone's acting really proactively to try and achieve those outcomes and goals. And so I think that alignment, that confidence matched then with some of the commercial objective financing and growth outcomes that the companies have had. Like, I think some of that can be pointed back to the program. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I think adding to that, and what I certainly saw throughout cohort 3 being part of it, is that, you know, you're getting strategies, actions, methodologies that you can actually take in and execute during the program and get feedback into that. So we know the program's not about, 2 weeks, everything stops, but it's a bit of time over those month period, which means you can still obviously run your business and do what you need to do, but you're actually be able to try things out. The next month you come back, you're getting feedback from the mentors and coaches, and you're actually seeing that in action and seeing the results of that through the program as well as what you can take afterward to apply, and just seeing those along the way and those wins along the way, which obviously make a big difference. That was one of the big things, and the great reactions getting from founders and some of the exec team, the stuff that they tried, it worked, let's push this out globally, and stuff like that, which I thought was really rewarding. I saw from the program as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. And to add to that, I always laugh in my mind when I think back about strategy day, because every time we run strategy day, which is a very tactical thing, it's not just theory, but how do you align your team around your strategy? Without fail, we have founders say, yep, like my team are so aligned on the strategy. And then they go through this and they're like, we are not aligned at all.
The strategy.
Yeah, we have it written down, but like how it's interpreted is so different. So really doing the deep work, I think, is the material impact that you'll see is you truly have an aligned strategy team working towards these common goals, not just a piece of paper that has some pithy statements of what you're working towards. And that's really meaningful. But I think the other thing I notice is with founders, oftentimes when they reach these pivot points where they're, 20 people growing to 40 or 40 growing to 80, with each horizon, they get more tired and they're feeling that decision fatigue. And so I think if anything else, what I've noticed from coaching day 1 to end of program coaching day, founders coming in and going, I feel so much more at ease that my team have like taken ownership. I'm not having to be the one making the call. They're coming to me saying, here are my 3 recommendations. This is what we should do. And just that confidence in their confidence is a really meaningful, tangible impact that I've seen founders take away from the program, which is cool. Great to see.
I'd agree. Definitely agree.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So next question, from an operations and HR perspective, what are the things you wish you knew when your team was 20 versus 100 plus? Dan, why don't you kick us off on that one?
Oh, look, there are many, many, many things. I think thinking about this one, the bigger thing would be the ability to actually manage versus do. I think when you're a team at a smaller size, a few of you out there on the call, probably similar, you're doing so many things and sometimes inefficiently. But as that team gets bigger, I think as leaders, you've got to then give things away, and that's often a very hard thing to do. But ultimately, having the tools to do that in the right way, to let go sometimes, and being, sometimes doesn't work out, to manage it effectively as well. That's the big thing. I think when you get to a bigger size and you take on more people and more responsibility, being able to manage that effectively and do the high value things and give, I think you talked about confidence before, but you also give the team the confidence to make decisions where you can let the training wheels off and go and do what you need to do type thing. And that's probably the big one as we grew as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you're giving things away, communication becomes such a pain, right? And that's the biggest thing I feel. I'm like, change management and communication. Like, it doesn't matter, because I'll get a lot of questions like this, like, what performance tool do we put in place, or what performance cycle should we do? And it's like, it really doesn't matter. But whatever you choose to do, just make sure it's intentional and it's communicated well, because ultimately, when you go from 20 people where you could just shout across the office, like, yo, Mark, this changed. We're working on this today. Yeah, cool. Okay, I'm going to change it. I'm going to go in that direction today. When you have, middle management and you've got those layers of communications, it's like a game of telephone if it's not intentional and your methods of communication aren't set up in an effective way. And so I see that if I had to answer that question from an HR point of view, it's how do we make sure people know what's happening and what they need to be working on, what's the most important, because that's another area where you'll see things slow down unintentionally.
Yep.
Anything you'd add, Mark? I mean, ops is finance as well, so.
Bless. No, I think that the two things that kind of just are adjacent to where you guys were kind of going with this. One is that communicating across the business effectively what all the KPIs actually mean, or what all the metrics actually mean. So as silly as it sounds, like one of the sessions we do in the finance team is actually creating a metrics Bible for your company, where you explain to everybody across function, like, what does an actual metric actually mean, and making sure everyone's measuring the same metric. And it's really funny, like particularly when it comes to sales, like how like who's onboarded a client, like when is a client actually like onboarded? Is it when they've completed the contract? Is it when they've signed up? Is it when they've started paying? It's amazing how different the same metric is considered across the whole organization. And so one of the things that's interesting is once you kind of, as you said, bring that alignment into place, it means that everybody is talking about the same thing, which is really useful. But then second of all, and probably most importantly, is that as founders, no one taps you on the shoulder and says, oh, just letting you know, your business is about to completely change and you need to change your skill set significantly over the next 3 months in preparation for going from 20 people to 50 or 50 to 100. And so like the closest you're going to get to that is the capability or the capacity to sit down with other people who have gone through these experiences before and can kind of give you some of those, a combination of those war stories and like nuggets and pieces of advice that Dan was talking about when things changed and happened for them. And I remember when Alex from Linktree was telling his story, and he was like, oh, everything changed here, and then everything changed here again, and people in the audience were like, oh shit, I'm about to hit that spot, right? And so I think that that's the key for what we're doing with the operations in HR and finance, is that we want you to have a heads up, or at least be 2 steps ahead, to know that when things need to change, that you're prepared and proactive on that, rather than running into that wall and wondering why, and then taking time to try and fix it reactively rather than being able to plan for it proactively. I think that's what I wish for the operations and HR and finance teams coming through.
Yeah, that's such a good point. When I think back to early days of my career, what I wish I knew at that point, it's like things will break and it's okay, but get ahead of it. Don't wait till it breaks. Be ready for it to break. So at least if you know on your roadmap, like I know this is going to break when we hit this headcount or this revenue, it becomes much easier to build the plane as we fly it, so to speak. So, all right, cool. So on to the next question. What do the startups that have got the most out of the program all have in common? And on the flip side, those who haven't got the most out of it or got the least out of it, what do they have in common? Ooh, spicy question.
I can jump in here. A few things. I think the ones that have got, and the flip side, those that have been open and I guess a bit raw and I guess vulnerable is the term, but actually talking about some of their problems with a bit of depth and detail, they're able to actually get answers, feedback from the team, the mentors, in a bit of depth and detail. I think, as I think you said at the start, Nick, sometimes at the start you're a little bit trepid about, you're talking about too much, but as you get into it and get more confidence, be able to talk about the problems and go, look, and not be shy about it, because we all have problems and challenges, right? And that's one of the things I think comes up in the program. You realize you're all in the same boat. But I think those that are actually, talking to detail, it might be one-on-one with a coach or a mentor, or within a group setting, you're able to get the team kind of working with you to help solve that. And the more detail you give, the more you kind of get out of it. So I think that was a big one for me. You can get a lot out of it if you kind of give into it, and be able to talk about that. And hopefully, because as I said, everyone's on the same page wanting to help and support your scale and growth.
Yeah, absolutely. That vulnerability, you see it early, don't you? Like you can tell which teams are really opening up, and it can be scary, right? Sitting with your founder at a table going like, I don't think you trust me. Like that's a conversation we're going to have. And like, let's figure out how you can get that trust in what I'm building for you and how we can work towards this together. And so I think there's some really great moments that we see happen when we're not even planning for it, but given the environment and the space of learning. It's great.
Yep.
What
What do you think, Nick? What's your thoughts in regards to the teams?
I might go the spicy side since it was the positive. I'll go like, what happens when, we haven't seen teams get the most out of it? And they, it's like a group project. There might be always one, but you think about what was it that they had in common? And I think it comes down to not necessarily time spent by the founders, but I think investment in the program and interest in the program from the founders, because it is a program that while there is founder involvement, it's heavily centered around the ops, finance, and people leaders. And with that, they come with so many great ideas and they're so energized. And they might spend a whole day in this program and then go back to the office and they're buzzing. They're like, I have all these ideas. Now, if their founders receptive to that and they're like, great, let's talk about it, and they carve out time, we see the transition of theory and learning going into the practical of their day-to-day business ops. But if they get back and it's like, you know what, we're too busy for that. Like, I know that's just, if we had a ton of budget, maybe we do that, and it's not always asking for budget, but just thinking about those moments of being open to new ideas or shutting down new ideas because we're just so busy. And I think I've seen that be the one common thing is when there's not a lot of encouragement and investment from the founder as those ideas are coming in.
Yeah, I think that just to add to that, Nick, the teams who have been most successful have had founders who have wanted to get as much out of the program as possible. And to your point, that doesn't always mean time. It doesn't mean that they're always there all the time. But what it means is that given their teams permission to make as many connections as possible, to get as many key learnings as possible and report them back, and that there is a genuine effort to be able to apply at least one key thing from each of the different sections as quickly as possible to be able to demonstrate and then also to implement some of those key capabilities quickly. The founders who don't buy in or are simply doing the program because like they feel like it's something they should do rather than because there's something where they can really invest in or get buy-in for, sometimes don't get as many implementations in as quickly, and the team do get a little bit frustrated with the lack of commitment to implementation of those learnings possibly. And then lastly, like the executives in our cohorts, if I'm honest, the executives who've got the most are the ones who are just a bit proactive. So the ones who are able to take a little bit of time before the sessions to make sure that they know who's speaking, to come up with some questions that they think are relevant for their particular business, and then making sure that they're making relatively good connections so that they can follow up with key mentors or advisors or people that they meet, and making sure that once, like during the month, they reach out to 1, 2, or 3 of those people that they've been really impressed by. They seem to get the most out of the sessions rather than the people who come and are passive through the sessions and then don't make that proactive reach out to some of the mentors. Realistically, the value in this is the ability to implement, the ability to create those connections and networks. And so I think that would be my common threads between the two.
And I see a correlation too when I think about what you just mentioned and who takes the most out of the program and that follow through that they have. Those are the people that we see 6 months, 12 months later getting all these promotions on LinkedIn, right? It's like, oh, that person like made it. That's amazing. Like they were one of the ones who really were proactive and like took as much from it as they could. But yeah, and their founders were there cheering them along, saying like, show me what you can do now. Like, I'm going to give you the freedom to build. And that's been really beautiful to see. So awesome. Thank you for adding that. That leads to the next question, which is very in line with this, which is how do CEOs or founders get the most out of the program? What would your advice be? On top of what we just discussed, I'm sure like showing up and being open. Yeah.
No, I think the two things that I've noticed, Nick, one is that on the first day during the strategy session and the first coaching session, and we might quickly jump into what a typical day looks like, possibly in another question, but the founders who come in and approach the program, or at least the start of the program, as if it's a pitch, like an investment pitch, where they have to show all their good cards and they have to look like they're all together, and and everybody in their team is a little bit concerned to put their hand up and actually say, actually, we're struggling with this because the founders are kind of sitting there. Like those founders typically take longer, or their teams take longer to start to open up and then be able to start to really to delve into the challenges that they're facing and then be able to figure out how they can then go through those successfully than the founders who come and encourage their teams to be able to say, hey, tell the truth. Like realistically, we're doing well, but at the same time, there's plenty of things here we could fix or we could change. We'd love to get that feedback as quickly as possible. So speak your truth. Talk to tell everybody in an appropriate way. It's Chatham House rules as part of the program. Like the things we're struggling with so we can try and get feedback as quickly as possible to implement. I've just noticed that in the strategy day in that first coaching session, the ones who come in being vulnerable, saying, hey, we're doing well, but here's all the things that are on fire or are broken. We'd love some feedback on how we might be able to attack these, get so much more in those first 2 months than the founders who come in and kind of like pitch at us about how well they're doing. And it takes a while to get underneath the facade of the armor or the ego a little bit. So that would be my encouragement, is just if the founders coming into the program, trust the process, enable your team to be able to talk through both the good and the challenging things, and then be able to start working as quickly as possible on where those sore points are. Those are the founders who typically get the most out of the program.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just adding to that, Mark. I mean, yeah, you talked about it, but also with that process, you actually, uncovering things you're not aware of. You got to actually a forum where you have the ability to talk about these things. You actually can ask a bit more pointed questions and get, that kind of raw feedback for your team. So you are maybe uncovering challenges you're not aware of. As Nick was saying, sometimes you realize your team isn't as aligned to those values that you had on the piece of paper that you actually thought about. And you actually got to talk about it and get through it and come up with ideas and strategies to kind of move forward as well. And what I've also noticed is, particularly some of maybe the smaller teams, is you're giving those a chance to shine, and hearing and seeing ideas that you might not be aware of, and seeing them come through was one of the big things I saw with some of the, I guess, the smaller teams in size, but in terms of scaling capability, it's certainly there. So there are a lot of, I guess, those takeaways along the way for founders out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say, give me your symptoms and we can diagnose root cause together, right? Like just throw it all out there. We can work on and learn together. So that's great. Now, I think we have time for one or two more questions. How can the program help scale outside of AU?
Yeah, look, I know from the upstream, we do have specific sessions all around kind of, international expansion and growth around that. I mean, that's, funnily enough, I think that's one of the biggest challenges, questions that gets raised, from a finance perspective, from a people, how do I manage that perspective, from a system, so how do I support that in global expansion, from a language challenges, etc. So that's a very big topic, and I think across all the streams, that's a common one that we address specifically with streams and throughout the kind of the sessions there. So that's probably a very large topic that is covered across all the sessions.
Yeah, particularly because most of the companies who are in the program can't scale to $1 billion without being in some international market. Like Australia is typically the first of several markets, and so I'm assuming the same with you, Nick. But like in the finance stream, like we have a lot of conversations around tactically, like from a commercial decision-making point of view, like how do we get 3 steps ahead? Like which countries are we potentially looking at? How do we have a finance function that's enabled to be able to actually have opinions on that? How do we think about tactical things like treasury management or ESOP planning or so forth if we're in several different markets? Like the tactical stuff is quite tailored to where the companies are at. But from a strategic point of view, we understand and we recognize that for $1 billion company outcomes, most of the companies need to then scale into international markets. And so it's certainly a present topic in the program.
Yeah. Just to add, sorry, Nick, to add to that, I was just saying is that, I mean, this is a Victorian kind of program. So, the scaling challenges from an Australian company trying to scale globally, where you're up crack of dawn in the morning for the US and then you're into the Europe at night. I mean, this is stuff that, lived and breathed. So it is trying to look at how do we solve this and how do we get through those challenges. And a lot of the mentors and coaches, we go through, myself included, all the mistakes we made when we were trying to scale. And so this is how we stuffed up, how to avoid it, or and going through real stories and trying to leverage that. So that's a big part of the program as well.
Yeah. And you just answered the next question, which is, what is a typical program session like? We share all the tea, right? Like
Yep.
What have we learned? Where have we failed? Because really, again, everything breaks as you're scaling through each horizon. And so it's learning from these mentors who've been in amazing companies, but can admit their own faults and their learnings along the way. And really that's what you're getting in those sessions. We'll keep the exact flow to the participants so you can experience the magic, but you're learning and you're hearing those things with Chatham House rules that you wouldn't otherwise have access to. And you wouldn't normalize that some of these problems are the same problems you're facing. And so I think that's the beauty of how the program runs. All right, last question. How much prep is required before each session? Generally speaking, what is the overall time commitment outside of the sessions?
Good question, Nick.
Yeah, I can answer that if you want.
If you want to start there, yeah.
Yeah, I would say there is a general alignment and understanding that every executive team is so busy with day-to-day BAU. And so the ask is that when you come to the sessions, you're fully engaged. And that limits the amount of prep work that needs to be done ahead of time. I'd say the most prep looks like you're going to be meeting these 3 amazing mentors in the people stream today. Check out their LinkedIn profiles, come up with a couple questions that are relative to their experience and challenges you're facing, and bring those. We also give a little bit of prep time in the sessions itself because we recognize not everyone's going to have that time. But I think that there's a reason why we say like everything happens in the session, and we really encourage participation and people showing up month over month, because then they're getting the most out of the time that they're there. And then the prep time is limited, if any. It's really about how do you then take the things back and integrate it into your business as usual.
Yeah. I would say that this isn't a business school. Our goal is not to give you homework. Our goal is to be able to support you to practically be able to make like key important decisions outside of your business and enable your team to be able to be as exceptional as possible. And so I will say, though, that some of the executives in our cohort who have made a little bit of time in their schedules to be able to reach out to mentors or to have a coffee with someone they were really impressed with, either another like one of their peers or like one of the mentors, do get a really strong network effect out of that by the end of the program. So there is certainly the capacity to dial it up and be a little bit more proactive if you'd like to be. But as far as the programming goes, now we've recognized, as Nick said, that we are talking to time poor tech executives who need to be focused on the most important thing, which is scaling your company. So we try and design the program as much as possible, not to require any outside work that is not going to provide like direct value to the business. And I think one of the things DSD that the operations, one of the things we do try and encourage is more conversations between the teams. So oftentimes some of the cohort teams will actually have sessions together after one of the programs so that they can kind of have a bit more like of a debrief to each other. I know some of the cohorts did that last year. Did you see anything like that with some of your teams, DSD?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, look, so a lot of those sessions, as Nick and Mark were saying, is we get together, we discuss it in the session, we come up with that, and often as we actually want to continue that, whereas myself and a couple of ops people or others would just continue the conversation going at the right time so they can get more out of it and as they need that. So as I said, we're all running businesses at pace, and we know that, and this is about how do you in a way to provide those tools ongoing in a way you can consume it and provide value as well. And I think Nick was saying, each session, if there's a couple of questions just to help the coaches and provide, once again, more pinpointed, more support, that's great. But it's all around kind of giving you value through the sessions.
Yeah, makes sense.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both. I think we got through most of the questions. So thank you to everyone who submitted their questions as well. I hope you got out of it what you were hoping for. And if you're still on the fence, I will just echo that I had one amazing mentor in my career, and I say I learned more than 10 years worth of my career with that 1 year working with that mentor. And so imagine having access to 30 plus mentors from world-class companies, what that can do for your individual growth and the acceleration of scale for your company. So hope to see you there. And if you have any further questions, you can reach out to the LaunchVic team. Thank you.